Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have watched Rent and Hedwig because today I'd like to talk with you about the LGBT themes in the musical theatre. And as some of you perhaps know already, this is a vast subject. There are lots of shows that are partially or almost completely devoted to the themes of the identity of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transsexual, and other non-typical, non-heterosexual characters. And if you know a little about the history of the musical theatre as a genre, the connection between gays and musicals has been as old as musical theatre itself. I will give you the link to the blog entry by John Kenrick, this Musicals 101 page, which features a whole section on the connection between gays and musicals. And if you remember John Kenrick and his page, he's mostly interested in the history of the genre and especially the early stages of the musical theatre. He writes about the early decades of the musical with some great names like Cole Porter, who was gay or bisexual at best. There have been lots of creative people in the musical theatre who are not heterosexuals, let's say from Cole Porter to Stephen Sondheim. But the treatment of the topics of non-heterosexual identities and the treatment of the characters displaying these characteristics has changed dramatically. As you may imagine, the first decades of the musical theatre, especially in America, they were completely in the closet. Nobody wrote about it. There were no gay characters in the musical theatre. The first show, probably, if I'm not forgetting something, the first show to include such themes would be Cabaret by Kander and Ebb in the mid-60s. And even then, it was only hinted, and there was some, as you would say nowadays, gender fluidity in the main characters of Cabaret, but it really wasn't the main topic. Then in 1975, there was a spoken role or partially spoken, the important bits are spoken really rather than sung, in the musical A Chorus Line. The concept musical about the auditions for the theater chorus, and people talking while they are auditioned about their reasons to choose a theater career, their love for performing arts, and one of the young men auditioning comes out and admits that he's gay. And this is, as I said, 1975, and this was probably the first role of a gay character who was not sensationalized, who was just talking about his motivations, and this was just as good a motivation as any of the other contestants, as people coming from the backgrounds of poverty, violence, and other problems, some family issues, being not given enough love by their parents, or anything else. This was just one of the possible life stories for those characters. Then in the 80s and in the 90s, we have more and more musicals that start having those issues. Probably another big breakthrough would be La Cage aux Folles. We talked about it a little when we talked about Jerry Herman and Hello Dolly. This was one of his later shows from 1983, and this was a comedy about a family consisting of a gay man and a drag queen and their grown-up son who gets engaged to a young woman from a very conservative background. So this was a comical musical, but the main song, the song that really was remembered, sung by the drag queen character, was serious. And this was the song about tolerance, this was the song about accepting who you are and demanding respect from others. The song, you may want to Google "I Am What I Am." This was the title of this song, and this was really a serious number in an otherwise comical musical. Then the creators of Cabaret went up with another show, The Kiss of the Spider Woman, based on a novel and a film. The musical premiered in 1992, and again it featured one of the main characters, or perhaps even the main character, is a gay man sharing a prison cell with a political prisoner somewhere in South America, and he is presented first of all as a great fan of silent movies, and the Spider Woman in the title is a kind of fantasy femme fatale from one of the silent movies he admires so much. But in the end, he turns out to be a heroic character, a character who can withstand even torture and not betray a friend. So this is really a change, and later on we have more musicals that feature drag queen characters, or well, drag queen characters such as, let's say, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, also based on a movie, a kind of jukebox musical, featuring some music from the 70s, I remember, and performed in a very flamboyant style by the drag queens. Another most recent, it's not the most recent, but one of the more recent shows featuring drag queens is Kinky Boots, one of the shows set in Great Britain in the 1980s during the period of economic crisis. And here we have a story of a fumbling shoe factory that is eventually saved by collaboration with a drag queen and her friends, her theater. So there we go. And then two more subsections before we actually move to Rent and Hedwig. So one is the subject very prominent in the 90s, that is the AIDS epidemic, the threat of HIV and AIDS, and of course popular culture reacted to it quite quickly, and there were some musicals made where the problem of AIDS became very central. So of course it features in Rent, and we'll talk about it in a little moment, but if you'd like more on this subject, there are two film musicals, or films with music, that feature heavily on this subject. One is called Angels in America, the other one is called Zero Patience. and the subject here is looking for the so-called patient zero in America who brought the disease there. And then we have a very interesting musical, a musical that links to another subsection I'd like to draw your attention to. That is the stories about people growing up, and sometimes gay people growing up and discovering their identity, or like in the falsettos, a boy growing up in a rather dysfunctional, you might say, family, consisting of a neurotic mother and her ex-husband who is now gay and has a boyfriend. So we have the mother and her new relationship with her psychiatrist, and we have the father with his boyfriend. It's all seen through the eyes of a young teenager, of a boy. So probably next week we'll talk about the musicals about children and for children. So this is something that will probably come up again. So we have those stories about growing up. So 3 or 4 more titles for you to explore. Spring Awakening, a story about teenagers growing up, set in the late 19th century. And of course, among many problems that these kids encounter are problems with sexual orientation. Eventually, it leads to tragedy, but I won't spoil it for you. Another one about school kids, secondary school kids discovering different aspects of sexuality is not very well known, but it has some sort of small cult following, a musical that had at least 2 different incarnations, like the falsettos, by the way. The title is Bare, Bare like naked, B-A-R-E. And it's about a group of students in a Catholic high school, also like in Spring Awakening, discovering their identities, and some of those kids discover they are not straight. 3 more. Well, there are so many titles, really, because this subject is huge. Another one, Fun Home. Again, a story about growing up, but this time the main character is a young woman, seen in different stages of her development, from her childhood through the university years, onto her adult life. And even as a little girl, she knows she is different, and gradually she discovers that she's lesbian. This musical, Fun Home, was awarded, I think they even got a Tony for the best musical once, because this was like one of the first musicals that was really centered on a non-heterosexual female character. Another one about a similar subject, also kind of school theme, but this time again the main character is a teenage girl discovering that she's lesbian. Maybe not discovering, but wanting to be acknowledged. The title is The Prom. The Prom as the final ball in high school. And here we have the story based apparently on a true story, in which one of the girls in the high school asked to bring a girlfriend rather than a boyfriend to a prom, and how the school reacted, how the local celebrities started to find an opportunity to win some publicity. So that's a recent one, and another one from very, very recent years. I think it's got like 2 years maybe. The title is Everybody's Talking About Jamie, and it's again about high school kids in Sheffield, so one of the now impoverished cities, industrial cities in England, and this teenage boy, it's also based apparently on a true story, discovers, well, maybe not that he's gay, I guess he's gay as well, but he wants to be a drag queen. So we have a teenage boy who wants to study to be a drag queen. And what all these shows and many more, because you have some aspects of that in Avenue Q, in The Producers, in The Color Purple, so you just do have it all over the place now. What do these shows have in common? Is they, all of them, promote a very tolerant outlook on the matters of sexual orientation and sexual identity. They try to convince the audience to respect everybody and to allow people to be themselves. This is perhaps what musicals are all about, allowing people free expression. And now, at last, let's move on to Rent.